6 seconds left. LeBron's got it. Tillman on him. Lakers down 2. James off the window. It goes!
Maxey driving through the lane. Got fouled and put it in. This guy can't miss right now.
Fox walks into the 3. There's your answer.
46 points for Jimmy Butler. Sets up on 3. Why not?
Don't call it a comeback.
The NBA playoffs are back.
True. Round 1 is heating up, and the drama is just now starting to get real good. And guess what? We've got Ryen Russillo here to answer all our comeback questions.
Plus, will running backs make a comeback in this year's draft? And can the Jets emerge from darkness with their new quarterback, Aaron Rodgers? From Wondery, I'm Ryen Shazier.
And I'm Dave Damashek.
And this is Don't Call It a Comeback.
Don't call it a comeback. I've been waiting on this moment my whole life. Can't call it a comeback. Everybody to your feet, make arenas rise. Yeah, I'm saying from the left to right, we get it on tonight. We do it all, but we don't back down. Just give me one shot, one chance, I'ma take it. Fixing up the game, but these records I keep on breaking.
Hey, Shek, let's get into these NBA playoffs.
Your wish is my command. 5-0. LeBron and the Lakers are coming back from their awful start to the season with a little added motivation from one Dylan Brooks.
I poke bears. I don't respect no one until they come and give me 40.
James drives. James is fouled and one. LeBron.
Oh, I love it. Real rivalries are making a comeback. Plus, the Kings came back to the playoffs, but they'll have to get through both the defending champions and De'Aaron Fox's broken finger if they want to keep lighting that beam.
Fox playing with his food. Shifted green. And fourth quarter Fox has been activated.
And one for Stephen Curry. The Wizard with the basketball.
And in Philly, the Sixers have already advanced to the second round once again. Is this the year, though, that Embiid and company finally break all the way through? For all that action and more, we've got a very special guest with us. It's Ryen Russillo. What's happening, man? Welcome to Don't Call It a Comeback.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm fired up to try to figure out all the stuff that I spent watching the regular season not happening in the playoffs.
Hey, Ryan, I want to say thank you for coming today, and I want to get right into it. You know who really needs a comeback? The Bucks. We're taping before Game 5, and let's assume Milwaukee wins at home. Can they make a comeback and avoid upset?
I actually still think they can, and maybe that's being really stubborn about this whole deal. Even without Giannis, I think Milwaukee should win this series. They have 5 of the best 7 players, if you run through it, other than Bam and Jimmy. I mean, without Hero, I mean, there's some really nice role players. They've done a great job developing players. Spo's probably the best coach in the NBA, but this doesn't make any sense. And I feel like once Milwaukee lost Giannis in Game 1, it was, okay, we're a little thrown off. Butler's coming for your soul. They weren't really ready. Like, that makes sense. And then in Game 2, they had 84 points at the half. And I'm like, okay, we're good. We're back to normal. They go down to Miami. Miami's dribbling through everybody for a team that's supposed to have enough size and length defensively. Maybe they're just getting slower. But then Giannis comes back for Game 4. And like that was the most certain I'd been about a series going 2-2. I was like, this series is going 2-2. And even as it was playing out, Butler going for 22 points in the first quarter, he was so tired from that I don't even think he got his energy back till like midway through the third, scores 11 points there, and yet still Milwaukee goes up big enough late into that fourth quarter where I'm like, okay, everything is back to normal. Everything is back to normal. Because this Miami team last year, who I didn't love, is a shot away from making the NBA Finals. That was a great shooting basketball team. This team is one of the worst offensive teams we had all year. They were 25th in offensive efficiency. They're down there with 5 teams that were trying to lose, and Miami's down there with them. So even with this Butler performance, which was an all-timer, I mean, he really is something that, you know, it was just special to get to witness it. Like, it was one of those games. There's not many of these in the playoffs for a guy going off like that. To see it all happen, despite, you know, the emotion of it, I still try to step back and go, I can't believe that Milwaukee's going to lose this series. So, yeah, the odds are against them now, but you can see the betting odds for it where it's not great value to bet Milwaukee to come back. Mine, you know, like at 3-1, the odds are like paying you nothing because people still think they can turn this around.
Man, see, I think people forget how good Jimmy Butler really is. Man, he just dropped 56. Playoff Jimmy, man, he's like three people, man. So I think he's going to really make a statement, and they're going to close out Milwaukee in Milwaukee for Game 5.
That would be even maybe more surprising. But go ahead, Shek.
That's right. Underdog stories are marvelous too, but there's nothing better in sports in my book than when everybody in the whole joint on both benches, in the crowd, the people watching on TV all knows the only chance that this team has is if that guy steps up, and then he steps up. That's nails. That's the best thing in sports. At the expense of Giannis and company, are you, though, talk about comebacks, are you rooting for a 90s comeback, a Heat Knickerbockers head-to-head, 7 games, 77-74 final scores, Riley, Van Gundy, all the rest of it?
No, I mean, let's not kid ourselves. I don't think I'm much of a fan anymore, but I wouldn't want Boston to be watching Miami and the Knicks. Look, I guess what you're saying is the second round part of it. So Philly be playing Boston. If Boston gets through Atlanta here, we'll try to expect. So yeah, look, I always thought Cleveland was more talented, but it's pretty clear their lack of scoring is an issue. You can see where NBA teams, the way they're designed, you want to have as many guys on the floor now that you have to guard. Like I was joking with somebody the other day. It's like, it used to be like, oh, we could have a 3-and-D guy. Now everybody who's a non-offensive player has to be somebody who can hit a 3 and hold up somewhat defensively. And the Knicks have a ton of those dudes around the center combo that they have. There's 4 players you always have to guard. And it feels like with Cleveland, too often they'll only have 2 people that you have to defend. So New York's put it on them. I would love to see something like that. I don't know if it'll ever be that. I mean, those series were so nasty and vicious, and the Riley factor of all of it. Alonzo being around, that Knicks team wasn't that great, that made it to the finals in 99. That was a really strange shortened season because everything that was going on with the labor stuff. But that was the kind of series where if you had no rooting interest whatsoever, you wanted to see those again. I mean, I'd like to see it for the Knicks only because, they were up 2-1 losing their minds. Imagine if they actually got to the second round.
Oh, it would be the best. I mean, the basketball, the Knickerbockers are one of those brands that the sport is always better when they're relevant.
Man, I can't agree with y'all with that, man. Like, the sport is better when a team is involved. I think just the sport is good as a brand. It's like when they say the sport is better when Indiana basketball is playing well. Like, come on now. Like, basketball is basketball. If the brand is good, the brand is good.
I think I understand what you're saying because, one part of it you could say, well, look at the TV media deals with the Knicks. Like when you really dig into how bad the Knicks playoff history is, like they're hanging on to this thing that was almost 3 decades ago now. But when you talk to any player that talks about what it's like to play in that building. So yeah, could you say the whole Mecca thing in New York City basketball and New York City point guards, all that stuff is like history and that they're hanging on to it? Yeah, I think that's accurate. But there's no denying that crowd is incredible from
100%.
The jump. And there's every single player feels different. There's just something about that building where the best players are like, hey, I want to show off there. And it's a lot more fun to watch it this time of the year as opposed to February.
When Jason Tatum is the best player and he wants to go off there, we're going to see a shellacking by the Boston Celtics. So I just can't see them. I can't see the Heat versus the Knicks, but that's why we watch sports, for crazy things to happen. So Ryan, like we have to definitely talk about the Lakers really fast. They started off the season 2-10, and their analytics department said they have a 0.3% chance of making the playoffs. After remaking their roster, King James, is he good enough to take this team to the finals? And is Anthony Davis all-time Feast or Family guy?
I think the Lakers can make it to the Western Conference Finals. I wouldn't pick them to win the West. They deserve all the credit in the world for remaking a roster where when it was bad, when they were 2-10, you'd be talking to other teams, just guys BSing about the league, being like, hey, who's the 3rd best player in the Lakers, right? And that's when Westbrook is just an awful fit for them. Doesn't make any sense. They should have never done it. We've already gone over all those lessons repeatedly. But they improved their number 3 through 9 on the fly in season in a way you just don't see very often. Yeah. And look, I'd argue that maybe the ultimate price, like we'll look back on some of the deals for this year that doesn't guarantee anything. Like if they were to lose in the second round and then this pick comes around years from now, you're like, wait, they threw that pick into that? Like, I think that's always important, but everybody wants to forget it in the moment because of what's possible now, because the West feels very wide open, because Denver's not taken seriously as a threat, which is probably
at all.
But it's not fair to them. But until you've done it, it's just those are the rules.
Yeah.
Sacramento Sacramento and Golden State. Nobody's necessarily afraid of either of those teams. And then you have this Memphis situation where, let's face it, like they're undermanned and they're probably, I don't know if they're going to learn from the ass kickings, because this is like 2 years in a row, if they don't get through this and come back, which I doubt they will, where they love carrying themselves a certain way. And then when it doesn't go their way, they get real petulant, real quick. And it's like everybody else's fault. And like, how can you be Dylan Brooks to say, I like to poke the bear, and then decline talking to the media two nights in a row? I mean, that's just awful. So there's a weird thing with them. So anyway, back to the LeBron part of it. I think they could get to the Western Conference Finals. I still don't know, and I know this sounds crazy the morning after he plays 45 minutes and has the game-tying shot and has 20 rebounds. I don't know if he'll have enough. And then AD every other game, like I felt like when he was touching his rib cage, I'm like, he's going to be already out for game 5 if they go up 3-1. Now, I don't know that. That's just what I was thinking back home. So it feels like everybody's a health bet. And maybe the one team talent-wise that I think is more talented than them is certainly Phoenix. But even them up 3-1 in this Clippers series, I've kind of been like, man, I wanted to see a little bit more domination than you in every one of these games, with them missing 2 of their guys for 2 of the 4 and Kawhi or Paul George for all 4 of them. So it's a wide open deal. It still would surprise me if we're talking NBA Finals with Lakers promos. That would be the surprising part of it. And to AD, I love his game. He was MVP level stuff for those 2 months. He's never been able to keep it going consistently enough in this second act in his career. But when he's right, he's one of the 5 best basketball players in the league. The problem is every time he falls down, you wonder if he's getting back up.
Well, wait a second, because I do want to lean into that. Maybe it's hyperbolic on my part. I don't think I can recall, I'm sure I can't recall, a guy, I'm not talking about all-star level, I'm talking about one of the best in the game. As you say, when he's right, one of the 5 best in basketball. Can you remember anybody in any of the major sports whose tides ebb and flow more than that guy does? It's wild.
Kawhi.
No, not Kawhi. There's nobody like Brett Favre or a gunslinging quarterback from the 90s, Elway, who could have stinkers and then carry a team one game and the next week, be the reason your team lost. Russillo, how say you?
Kawhi, though, when he plays, he's unbelievable.
Oh, you talking about also plays bad too?
I'm talking about goes for 30 one night and then the next game out goes for single digits.
Oh yeah, no, Kawhi's not doing that. Kawhi's not doing that.
I don't know. We talking some primetime Kirk Cousins here.
It's amazing because I tried to put together and it ended up being a short list and Kirk Cousins was on it, but also he's not in the MVP discussion. But I take your point. Yes, you're picking up what I'm laying down.
And to be fair to Kirk Cousins, which you don't hear me say a lot, Andy Dalton, like that was the trademark, was primetime Andy Dalton, because that was one of the craziest things I've ever seen. I remember when he was playing. I mean, look, we're talking to 2 Steelers guys here. There was a throw Andy Dalton had at the very beginning of like a Monday Night Football game where I think it went 50 feet over the guy's head just because he was so amped up about it. And I was like watching TV going, whoa, somebody's excited to be out here. And then somehow Cousins kind of, I don't know, I feel like that really belonged to Andy and it should have been Cousins, the whole thing. I still think Anthony Davis is better than both guys if you want to kind of land on that note. Because Davis, for all the faults and him being a bad bet moving forward, he was so good at the end with New Orleans, that playoff series against Portland. I'll never forget that series, going like, okay, he is going to be this franchise defining player, franchise changing player. And in a weird way, he actually has already done that. Depending on how you feel about the Lakers championship, to me, they won a title. Like all the teams are competing and they won. So that's a real ring. But you wanted this second act of it to be where he was going to hold up more. So really, whenever I'm looking at the West, and hell, maybe throw the East in it now, every year in the playoffs, we have 1 to 2 major injuries that completely alter the stuff. And some years we feel like we still got the right team. And if you hate that team, then you can sit there and pretend they were the wrong team and they just got really
like the
lucky.
Warriors every year.
Yeah, but that's bullshit too. I don't know if we can swear on this, but if you're a LeBron stan, you're going to conveniently forget that Derrick Rose blew out his knee, that Garnett wasn't with the Celtics in 2009. Like, I can do this all day, man. Yeah. I can do this all day.
I'm not saying it because I'm saying a lot of people say the Warriors. Every time they won a championship, there has been a major injury in every single round. So it just,
who says that? Really insecure LeBron propaganda people. Okay,
I do like LeBron, but that's not why.
Hey, look, you can love LeBron and not try to why are you scared of Steph? Like, what are you scared of? Like, nobody has, it's not MJ, Steph, and then LeBron third, okay? So the LeBron arguments aren't about Steph. Now, I'd argue Steph is the greatest teammate of his generation. I don't think there's any debate whatsoever. I've never once gone, hey, you know what? Maybe Steph is catching LeBron because I'm just going to count from 1 to 4, and now they're tied like an idiot. I wouldn't do that. But I see some of this stuff floating out there, and it's like, man, you can get real convenient with packaging this stuff a certain way. Every championship... Okay, you want to say 99% of them just to give me a little out here? You go through them all, you'll find an injury that you go, okay, that ended up being an easier path for him. LeBron has had him just like Steph has. And if you're including the De'Aaron Fox broken finger before we even know what it means, like, you know, some of these guys that do this for a living, it's like, hey, I have a good point. Let me make 1 or 2. And it's like, now let me make terrible picks. Point number 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 are terrible, but 11 is more than 3. So I got to tell you, I'm just not down with a lot of that stuff.
Picking up on that, you know, you talk about the unpredictability of these playoffs, which is anomalous in the NBA because as opposed to most postseasons, the NBA tends to be chalky and it tends to be incremental. A team doesn't generally come out of nowhere like the Sacramento Kings, make the playoffs, and then wind up in the finals that same year. It's usually a slower build in all of that. And some of it is because of the reverse of what you're talking about. The Dubs were one thing most of the season. Then Wiggins comes back in and they're very different. The Lakers are different with AD healthy and so on. Which of these do you... I mean, I keep making the comparison to Gremlins. Remember Gizmo? He was one thing. He was soft and cuddly, and you knew what he was, but then you poured water on him, and all of a sudden he turned into a monster. I feel like that's what a team like the Dubs potentially is in this mix. Do you think they can overcome, especially with the broken finger, as we mentioned, with Fox? How far can this Dubs team make a run in a imperfect West here?
I still think they can get to the Western Conference Finals. I picked them against Sacramento. I kind of felt like they'd come back and take care of business at home. Their road situation this year is one of the strangest things ever. Right, yeah. But, you know, the Warriors, Phoenix, you could argue the Lakers, definitely the Clippers. These teams are trying to figure out the rotation as the playoffs started. You know, it wasn't just like one team. It's multiple teams here. So every West team you can prop up, I could tear down as well. Denver's the best continuity bet with Sacramento. From a health standpoint, prior to Fox, Sacramento was the best health bet, and then followed probably by Denver because you trust that Murray is through his stuff and he's been great. He's already gotten through his injury, and really the only guy that's always wondered if he's going to stay healthy is Michael Porter Jr., and he's, you know, their third best guy. So from a talent standpoint, like I picked Phoenix. I think Phoenix should figure this out. But even they completely changed what they were doing with some of the rotational stuff from game 1 to game 2 because Monty Williams, like, I'm not a huge the coaches screw up guy. I don't like that. I know there's plenty of stuff I don't know that's going on in the course of a game. But when it's so egregious that a coach does one thing in game 1 that he'll never do again the rest of the series, you're like, he may have screwed up there because he's not doing that thing again. So it comes down to the health bet. It comes down to all those different things. But Golden State plugging Wiggins in, I mean, hell, they closed game 1 differently than they've closed the other games because first they went with Gary Payton. They wanted Wiggins out there, and then they stayed with Draymond. They stayed big with Looney and Curry. And then Clay's obviously part of the closing group. He'll always be part of the closing group. But there was different things that they were doing, trying to figure out if they wanted to close with defense, and then they tried to close with offense. And I always look at like those last 5 minutes, the closing 5, because that's kind of tells me who you are, what you think you're good at. It's just such a strange season. I know we've had multiple strange seasons, but like another factor is the lack of dominance at the top. As you said, Shek, this is about chalk. The NBA is usually like 3 teams, and then it'd be really weird if a team outside of that won an NBA title. This year, the Celtics led the NBA in point differential at just over 6 points per game. That's the lowest point differential of the NBA leader since 86-87. So it speaks to the dominance part of it, where I think the East is deeper at the top and there's all these options in the West. But we're talking about a real list of 7 or 8 teams. So it's if you're looking for the person who's really definitive about a team getting through all of this the next month and a half, They are much better at this than I am. Then
because I was about to ask you.
Right.
I was about to ask you.
I'm
like you keep wiggling around, and I'm about to say who's coming out of the West.
Well, you're asking me if I think they can, and I just wouldn't be that dismissive because of how wide open it is. I'm picking Phoenix.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I'm picking Phoenix, and if Rob Williams is healthy, I'd pick Boston coming out of the East, but I never think he's going to make it through this whole thing, too. So, if Giannis is back and fine, I think those are the two teams in the East, but I don't feel good about any of it, man. I spent 6 months watching this, and I've just Jimmy Butler last night made me go, when the Clippers were almost going to win Game 3, I'm sitting there going, do you know anything about this sport?
Yeah, so speaking about Phoenix and speaking about great teammates, your guy Chris Paul averaged the fewest points of his entire career this season, but he looks awesome right now in the playoffs. Do you think we can
Game
get
4 he did?
Do you think we can get vintage CP3 can make a comeback?
No, I don't think he's ever coming back. I mean, look, we're not that far removed from him going 14 for 14 and closing out the Pelicans last year in a game. All right? I mean, that was only a year ago, and he was incredible. And then the Dallas thing happened, and I was so depressed on that Sunday pod, I didn't even really know what to do. Like, everybody tuned in wondering what I was going to sound like, and I was like, hey, I'm bummed out. I don't know what to tell you, because they couldn't beat the Dallas Mavericks with this team, because Phoenix was awesome in the regular season last year, okay? The story for Chris Paul this year is, if you've watched it all year, there's a couple stretches where I started feeling good about it again, but it's just not there. It's just not there. He's turning 38 here pretty soon. I think he is capable of doing what he did in Game 4, where he took over, hit some shots, was really aggressive. But physically, there are moments where he'll have multiple moments a game where I'm like, that doesn't look great, whether it's getting a shot blocked or whatever. I think the scariest thing about Game 3 is he had open looks. He's going to have all sorts of open looks because Booker's incredible. Durant's out there. I'm not in love with Ayton, but he's still somebody you have to guard. Torrey Craig was going off. There were open shots for Chris Paul at the end of Game 3, and he was turning those down, driving and looking to pass. And I'm like, uh-oh. Because once I see that means there's stuff going on inside the player's head where that confidence is just below where it needs to be. So I would, I'm going to tell you, I loved what I saw from Game 4, but if you're asking me for vintage, I'm not sure that exists anymore. And I think a lot like some of the other players you're talking about, the variance of the lows and the highs is going to be wider with him as we keep going through this, if they survive.
Don't call it a comeback.
Boy, I'm a pedigree snob, so Booker and Durant as your 1-2 punch should carry the day coming out of the West. To answer the question you didn't ask me, Shazier, which is who's going to emerge from that conference. Do you think,
James?
Well, listen, I'm not down on LeBron. I like that team. I've liked that team, since the trade deadline. Now, Russillo, do you think, let's play a little what if here. Now they purge, I can't remember a bigger shift than this in the last couple of years. Russell Westbrook walks across the hallway and is a completely different player. A little what if. If Kawhi is right, is that the pick to come out of the West? He's not right, and the ship has sailed at this point.
And Paul George or just Kawhi?
Well, I mean, we knew going into the playoffs, Paul George was going to return. This may be the most, what I'm getting at, this may be the most vexing postseason in Clippers history, and that's saying something of what might have been.
Kawhi was so good the last couple months, and I thought he slowly got him back. Well, I wouldn't say back defensively to where he used to be, because I feel like
he was crazy. He was incredible. But
what he was doing in the beginning of this series, I'm like, are you kidding me? And he's making every shot, 50% from three. And it's funny too, because he'll get into traffic, and it just feels like he's about to lose the ball at some point, and he just never loses it, man. He's never losing the basketball. Like, you'll like this, Shazier, because I was like DeAndre Hopkins. There's no 50-50 ball with DeAndre Hopkins. It's just his. Like, and with Kawhi, there's no loose ball around Kawhi Leonard. That's his basketball, and it can be slow. It can look a little shaky for a second, and it doesn't matter. He's just going to score all the time. So looking at Phoenix still trying to figure themselves out a little bit. Maybe the people they beat when they had Durant, when they went 8-0, it's not exactly the toughest group of teams. They played Denver twice. Jokic sat out both of those games. Maybe I was buying into it a little bit because the Clippers have so much talent. They really do. The double-headed monster now at center gives them some options. Norman Powell's an awesome player. So if you go, hey, Kawhi's back in this, that's fine. But what you can't do is give me the version of Kawhi, and then you get to also take Russell Westbrook and plug him in for 30. Because you just said something that I disagree with. Russell Westbrook walks across the hallway and becomes a completely different player. He's still the same player. He's just now allowed to be him again. That's it. That's all it is, right? Like, I'm not shocked. I'm shocked he made all the outside shots that he made, but I'm not shocked that it's the number one option because they are desperate. They need him to be the number one option. I'm not surprised to see him put up numbers. I mean, that's what he's done his whole career. The problem is when you take him away from the ball, then it's pointless.
Yeah.
And the other problem is that when he has the ball every single time, as great as it was in Game 4, and we've seen some big plays and some big numbers throughout the series, history tells us that him having the ball at like a 40% usage rate in a playoff
turnovers.
game, okay, cool, tons of points. I mean, I hope you get a few assists if you have the ball that much, and he's put up big assist numbers, but it hasn't really led to winning basketball. So it's kind of cool that it's redemptive, but I don't know that it means everybody was wrong or that he figured all these things out. I just think they need somebody to have the basketball because he's the only one left other than Powell.
This is a comeback show, and I'll be remiss if I don't talk about the team that is truly having a comeback story in this playoffs. And we're talking about the Kings. 16-year drought. And, now they're going against the almighty Warriors. Do you think there's any type of possibility that they can make something happen further along in this series?
I wouldn't write them off. I'm not picking them, right? I'm not picking them to win two of the next three because I just trust in Golden State that much. Okay, that's how enamored I am with Steph and the whole group and them, figuring out their pieces, the way they're able to crank up the defense that didn't really match. But Sacramento was a bad defensive team, so I was like, I don't really. But they've been better. They've been better than I thought that they would be, and there's definitely a chance with two of those at home with that crowd. That's awesome. That's not really going to fluster Golden State, but they start putting together some shots. If Fox is good enough to go, some guys can play with a broken finger. Some guys can just tape it to the next one. Other guys, it totally throws them off. I don't know what's going to happen here. But I'm really impressed with them answering kind of those emotional blows that Golden State knocks everybody else out with. All these years of this Golden State team winning playoff games, there just came this moment where you're like, hey, we're in it. We're down 3. We're down 4. And next thing you know, you look up, you're down 15. The place is going wild. Clay's high-fiving everybody, and you're like, how did that happen? It's very Kansas City Chiefs-ish where you just go, oh.
Very Kansas City Chiefs.
What? Like, I thought we were winning. We're not? Like, how did that? Sacramento, every one of those times, I think it's going to happen. Now, granted, they got stomped in Game 3, but there have been other, like, big punches thrown at them in the other games, and I think it's really impressive that a team that hasn't been together before, like this group, they play like they've been together for years. They've battled with Golden State like they've had some playoff scars, and they have none. So I know it's going to be super disappointing to break the drought, be a 3 seed. You get Golden State if they were to lose and be bounced in the first round. But I really feel like this is kind of phase 1 of this group, especially with them being young and kind of learning about themselves, which is not what a Kings fan wants to hear, but,
No, you are exactly right. And that's what I've been preaching to Sacramento basketball fans. This season is officially a success. Game 1 was a success for specifically what you're getting at. Steph and Clay, twin assassins, drilling shots and those floaters in the lane from Steph. And De'Aaron Fox, when everything seemed to be going against them, drilling those threes in critical spots. Just in Game 1, that's a success, and it's something to build on for next year, no matter what happens going forward.
What do you think click for the Kings this season for them to just have a whole culture shock and become the 3rd seed in the West? Like they literally changed everything. Like, what do you think helped them become the team that they are now?
I know everybody talks about positionless basketball, which is cool. But there's something about everybody kind of playing in their area of the floor that I really like. It was funny when the Celtics put together that group with Garnett, Ray Allen, and Pierce, you thought, okay, maybe it'll take them a little while. And it didn't. They won a title in their first year. But you could see immediately, like, everybody complimented each other based on kind of where they played on the floor. And even Ray Allen, who you have this amazing shooter, he sacrificed the most because, he still was somebody who wanted to put it on the floor a little bit more. And it was like, no, you're not going to handle the basketball as much. But he still shot it so well that he could play off of Pierce, who could kind of move around, and Garnett, who still was always kind of a reluctant offensive player, as great as he was. He should have shot the basketball more. So the reason I say that is that you have Fox, who's your clear alpha 1 who can break down anybody off the dribble. You play him with Herter, who can do way more than just spot up shoot. Like, he can dribble to a point where he can make a little bit of a play off it, but he doesn't need the basketball to sit there and dribble while Fox would be watching. Like, Herter's going to go quick. He's going to make good decisions. Barnes, despite being really talented, right? We know his resume coming out of high school, lottery pick and all that kind of stuff, putting up some numbers. He's not going to shut down when he doesn't get the ball because he came up through the NBA knowing he was never going to be the first or second option with the Warriors. So he's already accepting of that, and he's been around for a decade. Then you go Keegan, who's a rookie who disappeared in this series up until game 4, and he starts hitting incredible shots. He makes threes. So now your fifth option offensively is somebody you know still has to be guarded. And then Sabonis, who I know he's got some issues here, the way he's being defended, and he's not really doing much. But he rebounds the hell out of the ball. He's a great passer. He's a competitor. He's a fighter. He's a lot of that stuff you want. So, yeah, you could say they're kind of undersized. But as you map out those 5 with Monk coming off the bench, your defensive just pit bull and Davion Mitchell, Lyle's the back. I'm just going to go down 15 guys on the roster here. But you could see, like, a lot of this is very complimentary. Mike Brown, who I don't know if he was a good coach or not because he had LeBron and he had Kobe, right? He comes in here. They play. It's funny because he's a defensive guy, and they sucked on defense all year. I can't excuse that. That's why I was always kind of like, I don't know, man. Great story. Are you going to defend anybody? So far, it's gone better than I thought.
Brian Billick is an offensive wizard. He won the Super Bowl with the Baltimore Ravens. What a great coaching job. They didn't score a touchdown for 5 weeks.
I know. He's sitting there going, can we lose, please? I'm not even enjoying this. And I think there's an appreciation for that city, for their team, in a way that's unlike anywhere else, because they almost lost him. All right? They were gone. They were packed up. They were supposed to leave. So I do think it's a combination of a lot of things where the basketball part of it, from the jump at the beginning of the year, I was like, man, I know they had kind of like a quick bad start, but they play together. They play together in a way that it looks like guys that have been doing it for multiple seasons. And so back to, kind of the initial thing where I felt a little dismissive is I was already penciling in the Warriors. Ryan, there's just a lot that made sense in roster building that usually doesn't happen in that short amount of time. So they, look, I can't tell you how impressed I am with them turning it around like this.
On the other side of things, the Sixers are ripe now. They're not on the build. The process is in year 47, I believe, at this point. And it seems to me that what I like about the Sixers is that the plague of sameness is all over the NBA. It's, perimeter shooting everywhere. At least the Sixers pound the ball on the low block to Embiid, and there is no answer for him. How far can they take this brand of ball in 2023?
It's really weird because, man, they sweep a team. They take care of them. I mean, what else do you ask of them? Sweep a team. Brooklyn was very good. I always kind of felt like, and I've said it a few times, that like Brooklyn hanging on to that 6 seed tricks some people into thinking like, man, post trade they were below 500. They were like 11 or 12 depending on which date you want to look at when all this stuff started shifting over. That was a nice cushion to have, so it kept them up in the standings because all the teams behind them were kind of jostling still. So Philly does everything you could ask him, and I still didn't like what I saw. Now we enter in another Embiid part of this. It's funny because we were watching Sacramento and Golden State, which we were talking about it, and I'm watching that game going like, how would Philly play in this game? Like what? And maybe they went slow because they didn't care and they knew Brooklyn didn't have a chance, but they also like to go slow. They like to go really slow. Harden likes to go slow. And I've never been a Harden fan as far as the playoffs go. I've been much more positive about Embiid, but like it's entering kind of that make or break stretch for him, even though I think most people look at Milwaukee and Boston and like them better if everybody's healthy, where I think Embiid, for a star and somebody who's going to likely win an MVP, he's who I voted for. I really struggled with that vote right up till the very end. But the reward is, hey, here's all your accolades. And the downside is now we're going to dump on you all the time if you don't get out of it, if you don't make it further in playoffs. And he hasn't ever gotten out of the second round, yet he hasn't really been destroyed. I think some of the ways the other guys get destroyed for a lot of that stuff. So I don't feel great. Even though, as I've said, it feels a little unfair to watch a team after 4 games in sweeping going, yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure I see it.
Don't call it a comeback.
All right, everybody talks about, Shaq this, Shaq that, Shaq in this league. All right, so I'm going to ask you, if Shaq played today, would it go back to post first play style, and will small ball die, or will Shaq have to conform a little bit to today's time?
I know the easy thing to do would be like, well, how would anyone defend him? Well, they would do stuff that they do. He wouldn't face up the way Embiid does, because Embiid catches it against the double that way because they don't want to put him on the block and have less space, and it's easier to double team him. So they let him kind of work from the top and look for things, even though I don't always love that. I just don't know if in today's game they'd be like, hey, let's run it through the post. I mean, it sounds ridiculous having Shaq. I mean, clearly he'd be getting touches and all that kind of stuff, and he might beat you up, but you might be trading 2s for 3s all night. You might be. And like, for all the generational protectionism that we see, I don't even know if that's a real term. I think I may have just invented it.
You better trademark it.
I laugh so hard every time I watch an old game and how bad the defense actually is. This thing is like the most overrated, misunderstood. It's like so inaccurate. Guys will be like, oh, back then, you throw on a playoff game. The help is late. They don't even have some of the concepts that they have now. Just because there's a couple videos of the Detroit Pistons killing a guy at the rim. It didn't happen every possession, kids. It didn't happen every position. They would have run out of players. So as great as Shaq is, he'd find a way, he'd get his points, all right? But he also may kill every one of his guards for taking contested threes when he was down there sealing some guy that was going to be smaller than him every time. You know, this stuff isn't going away. This team's going to be taking more and more threes. And if you were asking him to chase around a five-man that's setting up from the three-point line, like Shaq wasn't super interested in showing on screens that were at the free throw line. He's going to be like, we dumped on Rudy Gobert in that Clippers series, which is fine, by the way. I'm okay with it. But that poor guy was having to rim protect and then get to the weak side corner and contest threes. Like, and Gobert couldn't do it.
Imagine Shaq chasing out.
I think it would be awesome to do it because it would be the ultimate. It was like when Stanford was still running the power I not that long ago, right? And you're like, yeah. I kind of respect that they were doing this, or the Bielema stuff with Wisconsin, where it was like, no, we're actually going to keep playing this way. The thing that sucks is your boosters get mad because they'd rather you lose 40-38 than 15-12, and then the recruits don't want to come there. So,
yeah.
You know.
But that's some of the most compelling stuff in sports, though.
I love that.
We're lacking that in the NBA. It sort of makes me think of mid-'80s college football when you had Wishbone, Jamel Holloway, Oklahoma playing the U, throwing the ball all over the place. Stylistic differences. It's kind of like Parcells and the Giants playing Joe Montana and the Niners at the height of their powers. I think if you put Shaq... You mentioned what would Embiid and the Sixers do if they had to play Sac or Golden State. How would that look? It's hard to imagine the more defensive, the slower team keeping up, but it has a way of working itself out. I think Shaq would dominate to the point that you would have to modify your approach to defeat him. No? To me,
I feel like if Shaq was going against the Warriors. I'm not saying Shaq and Kobe, but just Shaq, if you just throw him on the team right now, he's going against the Warriors. Obviously, you're probably, Looney can't guard him, Draymond can't guard him, but at the end of the day, you have to worry about who's guarding Steph. Like you have to worry about who's guarding all these other people on the perimeter because, like you said, you're going to be trading 2s for 3s. So Shaq can get 50, but if we score enough points over here, I think we still get the dub. So, Ryan, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us, man. This was a great conversation.
Yeah, I mean, for the record, Shaq would get all of his buckets and he would get 100%. All of his boards. But if you look at the way offenses play now, it's hard for a lot of centers in a playoff game. Like, you'll see teams just go small because, they're trying to react to all the movement that's going around there. So, I just want to make sure that was clear because the last thing I need is a breakout video from you guys saying I didn't think Shaq could play in today's game.
What, this Russillo's lost his mind. All right, listen, dynamite stuff, man, as ever. We really appreciate the time. Enjoy the rest of these completely unpredictable playoffs.
Yeah, that is it. That is the best summary so far moving forward. Thanks, guys.
Oh, man, good stuff from Russillo. Thanks so much for joining us today. If you want to hear more of him, of course, make sure you check out his podcast, the Ryen Russillo Podcast on The Ringer. And next up here, your guy, CJ Stroud, is falling down draft boards. Can he make a comeback, Shazier?
Don't call it a comeback.
Okay, time for some other comeback stories in the news we need to give a look at this week. It is the check down. Aaron Rodgers, in case you've been, away in the darkness somewhere for the last few days, you might have missed it. He's officially now a New York Jet. Shazier, for the first time since the days of Broadway Joe, are the Jets finally back?
Some days I think they're going to be back, and then some days I don't. And I would say that they're going to be back. I don't think they're going to win any championships, but I think they're going to be back. I think that they're going to make the AFC East extremely competitive, and that they're going to be in contention for a championship, but I just don't see them winning one this year. They have all the pieces. They have the offense. They have the defense with Sauce Gardner, with Quentin Williams on the defensive side, with Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, Allen Lazard. They have the weapons and they have the coach. So the biggest thing when it comes to sports that people fail to realize is chemistry. That's why the Chiefs are so good at winning, because of the chemistry that they have. And Aaron, if he's going to go to the Jets, I feel for him to be competitive, for him to win, for him to have a team that people think is going to win a championship, he's going to have to work as hard as Patrick Mahomes, as hard as Joe Burrow when it comes to putting in that off time when nobody else is looking with his guys, like Breece Hall, like Garrett Wilson, like Allen Lazard, where he can build a relationship with these guys so they understand exactly what he wants. If they don't do that, I think the Jets are going to be an exciting team to watch. But when it comes to, winning the championship, taking the reins from the Chiefs, if he's not willing to put in that work like that or willing to do that when nobody else is looking, I don't see them winning it.
What counts as a turnaround or being relevant, again, is different for the New York Jets than it is, say, the San Francisco 49ers, the Cowboys, the Steelers, teams that have different levels of aspiration. And if you're a Jets fan and the goal is the Super Bowl, I hate to, be a pessimist, but it's been 13 years since Aaron Rodgers got that other team to a Super Bowl. So the assumption that he's now going to be the difference maker for you in the mighty AFC is maybe expecting too much. How about you win double-digit games, and we'll go from there. Texas running back Bijan Robinson may be the best prospect in the whole NFL draft this season, but no one wants to pay up for running backs, so some project him to fall out of the top 20 picks. 5-0, will running backs ever make a comeback on the level where they used to be in the last millennium in pro football?
The reason I don't feel that running backs will make a comeback the way they used to be is because you can get so much value in a guy in the later rounds. Like, think about it. Austin Eckler, undrafted. Le'Veon Bell, second round. Alvin Kamara, second, third round. You got all these dynamic backs that went later in the draft, and they're the household names. Obviously, the best running backs in the league right now are all first-round dudes, if you really think about it. King Henry, Christian McCaffrey, when you think of Saquon Barkley, even the guy from last year, Josh Jacobs. When you think about those guys, they've done everything they need to do for teams to feel that, hey, they prove their worth. But you can get so much value from a guy that you don't have to get in the first round, build up your team, build around a guy. And I just think it'll be really hard because they get beat up so much. And the way that the NFL is going right now is points. And most of the time that's throwing the ball to a receiver, throwing the ball to a tight end, or even throwing the ball to a running back and not going through the hole as much as they used to. I feel like running nowadays is more of, hey, I need you to respect this, than, hey, this is actually something I'm leaning on. There's only a few teams that actually lean on the running game like they need to, and those teams haven't won a championship in a while.
I don't know if I agree with that last part that you just threw in there. The Eagles came pretty close to doing that. The Niners love to run the ball around a ton. The Pittsburgh Steelers are attempting to do that, it would appear, in 2023. I hear your larger point, though. To me, the issue is the physical attrition, specifically for the running back. It just isn't worth it at the NFL level in a salary cap era to pay a second contract to a guy. Now, drafting him in the first round is another matter. I think if you perceive your team to be close a high-end runner like Bijan Robinson can be the finishing piece that makes a difference between making the playoffs and making an actual Super Bowl push. So maybe I disagree with you a little bit on some of the specifics you say, but I agree with you. It just is not worth it. If you are a high-end athlete, yes, you want to win, but you also want to get rich while you're doing it if you're playing in the NFL, and there are better paths to doing that than playing running back in
Shek,
the 21st
I have to ask you a
century.
question. Shek, I have to ask you a question. So with you saying that, Bijan Robinson, you're saying if you're one player away, you feel you're a running back away. If Bijan Robinson was on the Eagles now, do you feel that the Eagles would have won the Super Bowl?
I think that the James Bradbury PI or hold one way or the other, I think the critical moment of that game, the inflection point where it all changed, was Jalen Hurts' fumble. So it's hard for me to fully absorb the question. I love the what if nature of it. But yeah, I think if you consider yourself real close, and there are some teams out there like the Buffalo Bills come to mind, maybe even the Philadelphia Eagles at 10 from where they sit right now in advance of the draft. Yeah, I think that guy could push you across the finish line and get you into the Super Bowl, or maybe hoist into the Lombardi if your roster is close. The mistake is if you're a bottom feeder team and you're several players away, then do not be burning a first-round draft pick on a high-end running back because you're too far away for it to be worth it. After being the consensus QB2 on draft boards, in fact, he was the number one for some people, since the combine, CJ Stroud, your guy, has plummeted down draft boards in the past week. Shazier, can CJ's draft stock make a comeback, or maybe it never fell off at all and it's all just a smokescreen? Where do you come down on this?
I don't like all this pushing a player down towards the end of the draft, devaluing guys. Oh, now they're showing the score he had on his IQ test and his decision-making test. If you go back to the last two seasons where we've seen all these quarterbacks, you've seen Bryce Young, you've seen Bryce Young, you've seen Anthony Richardson, you've seen Will Levis, you even seen Hayden Hooker. With all these quarterbacks, you can't really name many players that had better seasons, besides probably Bryce Young, that had better seasons, both seasons, than CJ Stroud. And the thing that I also don't like is that there's like, oh, he can't be a winner and this and that. And I was like, this dude is a winner. Every single quarterback that's getting drafted right now, none of them won a championship when they were holding the reins of a team. Bryce Young won a championship, but it wasn't his team when they won it. So the thing is, I don't understand this. CJ has done everything he needed to do to prove that he's a great player. Oh, I'm sorry. He had one bad day where he took a test, and one guy said, I've never seen a good player that took a test like that. To me, it's just, everybody, sometimes I feel like they judge a little bit too much when it comes to off the field things. And I feel his draft stock might not make a huge comeback, and somebody might, it might be lies. It might be just trying to pump up smoke so he can slide in somewhere, but I don't, if his draft stock slides, I don't think, if all this stuff is true, that's very unfortunate because you're playing with somebody's money. But I definitely feel that CJ is, out of all these guys, is the one that's most pro-ready right now. The rest of these guys are projects besides probably Bryce.
I think it's about whether or not, consider the circumstance specifically when you're talking about a college kid. Did he elevate the unit that he was on? I think that's the measure. It's not whether or not he won national championships. Eli Manning didn't win anything at Ole Miss. He just elevated the program. And so same is true for Patrick Mahomes. We could tick through a bunch of examples on that. I'm with you. I think it does matter the ability to assess the quick trigger decision making that some of these tests are not at this point IQ tests so much as they are on the field. How quickly do you process? But ultimately, I think we park our cars in the same garage, which is to say, watch the game tape. Nothing else matters nearly as much as the evidence that we all have in front of us, which is them playing college football. Make your evaluation based on that. And I suspect at the end of the day that that's just how every GM in pro football is ultimately making their decision, and everything else falls by the wayside when it comes down to it.
Like, I've been listening to Robert Griffin. He said it earlier on I think it was on Get Up Football. He said with CJ Stroud on third down, which is the most important down, he's only given up 7 sacks in 2 years, and he's throwing at like a 75 or 70% completion rate. That's decision making at his most high if you really think about it. So it was just like, now you're going to go, oh, this guy had a better test. But if you look at his stats and when you compare completion rates and all those stats, it doesn't even compare to, or the film doesn't even compare to CJ. So obviously I'm a little bit biased. But to me, I just don't like, but even if this was Bryce Young, I don't like how people tear people down at the draft, especially a few days before the draft, so I'm not a fan of that at all.
I hear you. Spoiler alert. 4 quarterbacks are going to go in the top 10. That's what happens almost every year. Last year was the anomaly when only Kenny Pickett went in the first round. Hey, Guardians of the Galaxy is making a comeback with the 3rd movie in the series coming out this month. Shazier, if you were casting me in a Marvel movie, which superhero do you suppose I would play?
Casting you in a Marvel movie?
Yeah, that's right.
So if you were somebody in a Marvel movie, I will probably cast you as like Hawkeye.
Wait, what in hell? I don't like that. That hurts my feelings. I see. That's not even passive aggressive. That's just aggressive. You made me the worst of all the superheroes.
How is he the worst?
I didn't know that he was the worst, or else I wouldn't have said. You know exactly what you're doing, 5-0.
How is he the worst?
He's a bum who shoots arrows. What do I care? I want a power, man. At least get me in the Iron Man suit, and I'll show you what I can do.
So who would I be? Who would I be? If you're Hawkeye, who am I?
I'll try to be nice. Here's what I'm going to say. Because you are mild-mannered, you're a lovely fellow, but on the gridiron, you were nasty. You took no prisoners. That's the Hulk. You could flip a switch and turn green, except you turn black and gold. But you get my point.
I'm cool with the Hulk. I prefer that would be somebody else, but I'm cool with the Hulk.
Could I be Spider-Man?
No. Spider-Man's in high school, and Thor's the oldest, so you could be Thor.
That's it for this episode of Don't Call It a Comeback.
Hey, if you want to make sure to follow, rate, and review the show wherever you're listening, and check us out on YouTube on the Wondery channel. To make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. See you all next week.
Where's my bow and arrow? I got a target.
Don't call it a comeback. I've been waiting on this moment my whole life. Can't call it a comeback. Everybody to your feet, make arenas rise. Yeah, I'm saying from the left to right, we get it on tonight. We do it all, but we don't back down. Just give me one shot, one chance, I'ma take it. Fixing up the game, but these records I keep on breaking.